The topic for tonight is choosing a club. I know that there's probably people on here who have kids that have played select soccer before. Maybe some have played recreational soccer and are making that transition. And I thought that perhaps I would share some of my insight and background in club soccer. I've been around the game for coaching for a little over 25 years, and I've run a small club here in the St. Louis area for about 8 years. I worked for a large club in the area for about 7 years. I've coached high school soccer, and I've been around the game. And I know this time of year when kids are trying to choose and parents are trying to make the right decision for their kids, it can be a little crazy, a little tense. Nerves get going, and it's tough. It's a tough time, I know, for club administrators as well. When I was running the club, it was probably the toughest time of the year as we were trying to place kids and get them in the appropriate spot for themselves where they could develop. So hopefully this webinar will shed some light on the process, or maybe give you some ideas of things maybe you haven't thought of. I will share my screen and start the presentation. Okay. I trust everybody can see that. Just holler if you can't. I do have some people unmuted. Okay. So choosing a club. I guess if you look at the landscape of soccer, not only in St. Louis, but in most larger cities around the country, you can look at the number of clubs in an area and feel like, where do I go? What do I do? How do I get there? How do I choose the right one? And sometimes you throw the dart or kick the ball against the target and you hit the right spot, and other times you don't. Sometimes it's difficult to make the correct decision, and there's a lot of things that come into play. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some of those. And to start, I'd say that probably the best place to start is to think about why your child is playing the game. Kids play soccer for a lot of different reasons. Some play for fun. It's a very social game. Buddies from school play together. They meet kids at their elementary schools or high schools, and they want to play together on the same team. So it's very social. As parents, sometimes we want our kids to go out and do things to get exercise and be active. Some kids are very competitive, and they're driven, and they want to play at a very high level, while other kids are okay playing in a recreational sense, which is fine. I think that there should be a place for every player to play at an appropriate level. Some kids have this dream of playing college and even professional. We have players that grew up in St. Louis that have played professionally, have gone through the ranks and have made it all the way to the national team, to the MLS. And some kids play because their parents just want them to play. They want them to be involved in things. So I think a really good starting point is, why is your child playing? That will help you align where you should go or where you could go to help them meet the needs of your child or children. All right. Back from the day when I was director of coaching and player development for a club here in town, I talked to parents often when they were looking for that club that was the right place for them. And I always thought of it as a three-prong approach. Is it a good fit for the player? Is it a good fit for the family? And is it a good fit for the club? And I really firmly believe that if those three answers are yes, I think there's a great opportunity for success for your child and for an enjoyable experience, not only for the player, but for the family and for the club. Youth sports has changed, and there are influences and outside factors that when one of these things don't line up, it can make for a very difficult time for maybe the player or the family or the club. So if we can get players to a spot where it's a good fit for them, for the family and the club, the chance for success goes way up, I believe. So I think the first thing I like to do when I talk to people and give them some thoughts on this topic, and I got a call yesterday actually from a parent looking for advice on how to find a club for their son. And the thing I like to offer is to think about what is the philosophy of the club. Most clubs have their mission and vision statement on their website, and you can call and talk to the director of coaching. And I think these are all valid things to wonder about and to put into the equation. And we're going to explore each one of these in a little bit more detail. But as you're gathering all this information about the club or a club that's going to possibly be a good fit for you, how do you find that information? And I like to think of it as an interview. I think that you are going to invest a lot of money and time for your child to play for a club. And if you have multiple children, obviously the cost factor goes way up, the time investment goes way up. And I think it's very realistic to interview almost, if you will, the people that are going to have influence on your child. And that could be the DOC for the club, the director of coaching. It could be an age group coordinator. It could be the coach themselves, or it could be all of them. How? Phone obviously is a very easy way to start out to see if you think it would be a good fit. References, perhaps people that have played for the club currently or have played for the club. And then ultimately in person. Can you go out and meet people, watch a training session or watch a couple of training sessions, have your son or daughter participate in a couple of training sessions? So all of these things are very viable. I think that, and again, as a director of coaching for a club, I really tried to encourage this process. I wanted people to know that in the end, when they made the decision to play for my club, that it was going to be a good fit for them. And I hope that we all work towards getting to that point with our players. So I would encourage you to do some probing and vetting and find out what exactly your child is going to be involved in. One of the things philosophically is winning versus development. I think that's a very valid question. I think it's one that deserves to be talked about. Obviously, winning versus development, that conversation changes as kids get older and they start to play in a more competitive environment. If it's a recreational type of environment, development is important, just like it is in the competitive environment. And if kids start to play and make their way through their playing pathway and they play on teams that will compete at national levels, then obviously winning does become more important as they get older. But ultimately, I'm hoping that the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, we're going to hear that the development of players is the most important thing. And not only of players, but as people. We like to think of it as the Janes and Joes is as important as the X's and O's in soccer, that we want people to develop as players and as people and then as players. And I think it's important to keep that in the forefront of our minds. What is the cost to the players if winning becomes more than development? Well, there's a lot of things that can happen. Kids' playing times can diminish. There could be situations where certain players get more of a coach's attention than other players. Positionally, kids get stuck into spots because they pigeonholed there when winning becomes more important than developing. And again, I am a firm believer that when we do the little things right, winning tends to take care of itself. So that's philosophically a question that I would definitely ask. Training. Again, philosophically, it's important to be on the same page. What does this look like? Is it fun? Is it a safe environment? Does it look like soccer when they're out practicing? And this is why I would encourage you to go and watch multiple training sessions and talk to the coaches about what they do, how they do it. You've got a vested interest in what your child will be doing for the course of a year. or a season at least if they're playing recreationally. And I think this is valid information. Are there lots of cones or lines and kids standing around, or does it look like the kids are playing? What is the philosophy of the coach when it comes to how they allow kids to learn? Is it guided discovery? Do the kids have an opportunity to learn from their mistakes without the fear of being ridiculed or, possibly punished for making mistakes? Because the reality of it is that kids learn from their mistakes. They need those opportunities to go out and learn and to let the game be the teacher. And sometimes coaches take that road and other times they don't, because again, perhaps winning is more important than the development of players. Ultimately, we want to get kids to be in a situation where they can get references to the game, and references to the game comes through making mistakes and having successes, which brings me to the next point, that I think finding a balance between success and challenge is really, really important. I think for kids to grow and to develop as players, they need challenge. And at the same time, they need to have some success in what they're doing. So I would have conversation about training and what that looks like. Another area that I like to talk to people about is it a player-centered or coach-centered approach? This is something you could probably see if you get an opportunity to watch some things, if you get a chance to watch a training session or two. Are the players playing? Is the ball moving more than it's not moving? Is there a lot of talking from the coaches, and the kids aren't active? Because the kids ultimately, when they come to train, they want to play the game. We've done some kind of pseudo studies where we've put stopwatches on coaches in some of the courses that I've taken myself, and we've timed how long the ball is actually in movement versus how long it's not. And probably one of the most alarming situations that I witnessed was 35% of the time the ball was moving and 65% of the time it wasn't. And that certainly was much more of a coach-centered environment. So that's something else to consider. Parent expectations. How will the club and coach inform the parents? How will the club and coach involve the parents? Do they involve the parents by getting them to be team managers or being a social coordinator or, being somebody who takes stats for them? I think that's a great opportunity for parents to be a part of their child's life and at the same time help out the clubs, because the clubs and the coaches always can use extra hands or eyes to help out. What is the role of the parents? What are the expectations from parents? We were very explicit about what we wanted from our parents when it came to when I was coaching in club, how we wanted them to behave on the sidelines. Those were expectations, and they were all very aware of that. I think it's important to be on the same page as the club. A lot of clubs prefer that we turn those kids over to their coaches and to their directors of coaching and let them do their jobs, which I think they should. A lot of them are trained at high levels, and it's what they do for a living. And I think that just, again, being on the same page when it comes to expectations is important. Something else, especially from a younger perspective, players that are younger, are there opportunities for kids to experience the game from different positions? I talked about that a little bit earlier when the cost of winning versus development. And, sometimes we find that we'll put kids that can kick a ball very far in the back so that coaches want the kids to be able to kick the ball up to their forwards, and they find themselves in those positions, and that's where they play. I've seen it a lot out there where coaches are unwilling to move players around and give them the opportunities to experience what is it like to play forward, what is it like to play in the midfield and defenders. It's all philosophical as from the coach and the club as to how they handle that. Up to a certain age group, when I was running the club, we had our kids play multiple positions in every game. Some clubs choose to do it or coaches choose to do it. where they play one position one game and they'll play a different position another game. And that's another way to give them exposure. But ultimately, I think the kids, especially again at the younger ages, they need an opportunity to experience the game from different perspectives and different positions. As they start to get older, certainly their skill set will drive them to be a little bit more suited, for a particular position. And that's absolutely fine. Some players feel more comfortable attacking a goal, while other players feel more comfortable playing in front of their goal to defend it. Some players are okay playing in the middle of the field where there's a lot of chaos, 360 degrees around them. Some players prefer to play on the outside of the field where they have about 180 degrees to contend and tend to. So I think that having those opportunities early on helps kids figure those out, but ultimately it gives them perspective on the game. So is that, I would certainly, if you have a young child, I would ask that question of the coach. How do they feel about that? What is their thought process on moving kids around and letting them play other positions? Playing time. This is something that's worth addressing. How do all kids get equal playing time? What determines how much time do they get? If they miss a function, does that come into play? Are they splitting time with one person for one spot? So I think those are something that's something that can be addressed with the coach. Attendance at team events, training matches, and tournaments. What are the expectations of the clubs? Some clubs have take the philosophy where they want kids to experience other things. One of the bullet points I have on here are, do the players get an opportunity to participate in other sports? Do the coaches support clubs or the coaches and clubs support the Olympic development program for soccer and allow them to do that? What are the consequences of missing those events if they have to miss it? School functions, religious functions, things like that. How is that handled within a club? Because ultimately, at some point, the kids are going to have something, whether it's a school function or maybe it's a family function, a wedding or birthday, something like that, that's important to the family. Those are all good things to have ironed out before you make that final decision. What does travel and competitions look like? Are the teams playing in local leagues here in town or in your town? Do they play in the Midwest Conference League, which would require some travel in the Midwest? The Girls Academy, which is new this year, but there will be travel depending on what conference those kids play, and some will travel and play Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan teams. The other academy division will be traveling to Texas. So it's important to know those things. ECNL is another league, very high level league, but will require travel. So that's something to think about. And that's those are, again, philosophically some of the things to think about and to consider and investigate a little bit so that you have an idea about what the culture and what the landscape of that particular club looks like. As far as coaching expectations, hopefully these are some things that we can see in all of our coaches: development, knowledge, learning, training, and ultimately coaching. How well do those coaches paint the picture for the kids of what the game is? And again, keeping perspective. If it's a recreational team, it is a social as well as a very fun environment. Hopefully, even on the competitive side, they see those elements of fun and social, but there are certain expectations that go up with playing in a competitive division, a competitive league, or a competitive team. So those are things to keep in mind. But whether you're playing your son or daughter is playing recreational or competitive, these are things that we would hope that we would see of all of our coaches. At MYSA, we try to offer coaching education throughout the year for our coaches and encourage them to continue to do that so that they can continue to learn and grow. And ultimately, who is coaching your child? You can go out to any league that you want to on a weekend and see a varying degree of coaching, where some coaches are extremely vocal and and are very animated and sometimes overboard in how they communicate with kids, and the direction they give them? Or is there a coach that pieces the puzzle together for the team and connects them and is nurturing? So I think it's important to find out exactly who is coaching your son or daughter. I think when it's difficult and it's not always possible to know heading into tryouts who's going to coach which team, how many teams are they going to have in an age group. But I do think that in a lot of situations, you can tell and be told who's going to be heading up this team or that team if this is where they see your player, your son or daughter fitting into. I think it's important to know the personality of a coach, I think can make or break a situation for a player. And sometimes it's not always a good fit to be with certain personalities. That's something that hopefully can be found out and worked out beforehand. So is it possible to find that out, who exactly is going to be coaching? If they make this team, maybe the club can list their age group coaches, and who the head of that age group is if they have one, so that if my son or daughter makes this club, they're going to be playing for one of these three coaches, and you know who they are. And is it possible to experience training sessions? Obviously, with the COVID-19, things look very, very different right now, and clubs would have been done by now with making their decisions under normal circumstances. They've since backed up the tryout date to June 20th, and depending on what the governor comes out with for phase 2, social distancing, whether it goes away or it stays, will impact certainly that June 20th date for clubs. But if there are chances, there are clubs right now that are going and doing kick-arounds or taking a look at players. Again, it's not playing, it's not scrimmaging, which is ultimately what you want to see the kids do during tryouts to see how they play within the game. But it's something, more along the lines of isolated skill work. So if you get chances and opportunities to go out and participate in those types of events before you make a decision, that would be great. And I know that most clubs are discouraging communicating in person with the coaches that are running those because of the social distancing. So you might have to communicate with them via phone or via email to get answers to your questions. Whereas normally, under normal circumstances, you may stay and talk to the coach after a session or whatever. So something else to keep in mind as a possibility. Once you've identified a club that meets your needs, one that can support the growth and development of your child, you'll probably get an opportunity to sign some type of paperwork as a commitment or a contract for the year. If you're playing competitive, the clubs will operate on a yearly calendar, so that if you sign up to play for the fall 2020 season, you will be committed to that team through the spring of 2021. There are financial obligations, and just make sure you read the fine print and you understand what those are. If you go ahead and you give a deposit or a down payment, and your son or daughter decides to go somewhere else at the last minute, there may be commitments to that club. Clubs have a responsibility to build their financial structure within each team and within their club based on a certain number of players. So I completely understand that they need to, when somebody agrees to play for the year, that they are committed to that obligation. And if 2 or 3 players decide at the last minute or through the course of the year that they're leaving, it leaves that team and that club in a situation where they could struggle financially. So just make sure you understand that, and hopefully doing your homework and getting an opportunity to meet and vet and get a feel for that particular environment. Hopefully it's one that through the course of that year will be a healthy one for the player, for the family, and for the club. So pay attention to those. The other thing I wanted to address tonight is just a little bit a lot of parents, and I think the last numbers I heard, about 30 to 45% of parents feel that their son or daughter may get an opportunity to play soccer at college, and that this could be a vehicle for them to get through college. And some will, but a lot of them won't. And that's okay. I think that there are so many social and life skills that can come from playing team sports that ultimately kids get to that senior year. If they play all the way through senior year of high school and decide that they've played enough, they want to go on and be a college student. Studies show approximately 1% of players. The highest I've seen is 3% upon senior year will get scholarships to go play somewhere. So I guess I bring this up because I want there to be a level of realism that about 70% of kids leave the game by the age of 13. And so I think that as parents, we need to understand that. I'm a father of 4. I've got 1 left in high school. 2 are done with college and 1's in college. And it went really fast. And my boys, the first 2 that graduated college did not play in college. They did play all the way through high school, chose not to play in college. And my one daughter is a competitive rower. So I don't have, of the 3 that are either in college or through college, none played soccer in college. But my 2 boys got scholarships. And it was based on service and academics. And there are different pathways to scholarships for kids. Yes, there are those that will get money for playing sports, and that's fantastic if it works out. But I think as important as that is and we want those kids to dream and have that aspiration to do that, the academics, the service, being a well-rounded person are things that colleges are looking at more and more these days. So I try to always point that out to parents to just keep that level of realism in there when they're making decisions. I see parents from time to time that compromise situations for their kids to be in. Maybe it's just playing for a club that is very competitive and driven, but maybe is not a great fit for that player, but they get pushed into doing that in hopes of scholarships. I guess the biggest message is that as a father who watched his kids play soccer is to enjoy that time watching them play and enjoy the opportunity watching them be on the field with a team and exercising and hopefully smiling and having fun. If it heads down and leads down the road to college scholarships or playing collegiately, that's fantastic, but it may not. So make sure you enjoy that time with them. And as they grow up and play the game. I will leave you with one resource. I think it's a great book. I read it years ago, but I was talking to somebody the other day about it. It's called Changing the Game by John O'Sullivan. He was a professional soccer player for many years. Now he goes around and he coaches. He's coached youth soccer, high school soccer, club soccer, and he goes around and he talks to parents and to coaches about developing leadership and how the game can be a great vehicle for a lot of different reasons. So if you're looking for a pretty easy read that offers a really good perspective on the game, Changing the Game by John O'Sullivan. And it's really fits for all youth sports, not just soccer. So that is a resource that is out there for you. And I just want to thank you and wish you the best of luck as you head down this path to finding a club for your kids. I'm going to stop sharing now and see if we've got some questions that popped in. So, Sam, I'm going to unmute everyone and see if there were any questions or if there are any questions now.
I don't have any collected, Jeff. None came through on the chat, so I think we can probably open it up to people now.
Okay, great. We'll stay on and give you a minute or two to type some questions in. You are all unmuted from my end. If you want to unmute and ask a question, please feel free to do that at this point. We'd love to have any dialogue or answer any specific questions that we can. Okay.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
This is Tom. So, quick question for you. My girls both play soccer for a club, and in terms of watching and participating in practices, are they allowed to do that within a given season? Or, I mean, what's the etiquette around actually participating in other clubs' practices?
Yeah, players can go anytime. Years ago, a few years ago, there was a waiver they have to get signed by their current coach and by the club that they were going to. But these days, kids can go out and experience any club they want to. If there's an opportunity for them to go out and be a part of a training session to experience that club, it's totally fine. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. I encourage and hope that parents do some digging and some background work heading into it, because it gets changing clubs in the middle of the season can get sticky. There's transfer fees that are involved, and most of the time you're going to be responsible for the club fees for the first club that you start at before you can get released and go to another club. So it gets a little costly, but yes, Tom, you can, if your daughter is wanting to go and experience another club during the season, they are welcome to do that.
Thank you very much for that answer. And also thank you for taking the time to do this and putting the PowerPoint presentation together. It's great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for participating.
Hey, Jeff. My name is Scott, and I had a quick question for you.
Sure.
My daughter is very young. She's only 6, and we've been presented the opportunity to join a brand new startup club. I didn't know if there was any concerns or anything I should look into that, as the research of the history might be, obviously it's pretty vague.
Yeah, Scott, I would definitely talk to those coaches and the directors and ask them where they came from, what were they doing prior to this year. I think then you can get that can be a lead as far as like talking to people maybe that have played for them in the past or that have been part of maybe the club where they came from. So I think that it's worth doing and doing a little bit of digging. But I would ask them a lot of those philosophical questions and have those conversations. I think it's definitely worth doing, even though your daughter is very young. If they get put into a great environment, it could inspire her to play for so many more years to come. If it doesn't work out and maybe the goals of your daughter and the goals of the club don't line up, and that goes back to that 3-prong fit, then it could just be a not so good situation, and it could push her away from the game. So all of those things, and this presentation will be online. We'll put it up on our website. So if you want to go back and look at any of the things that I brought up, you certainly are welcome to do that. We should have it up by tomorrow and take a look at it. But if I can answer any other questions along the way as you start going down that road to try and find information out, feel free to reach out to me. That goes for anybody. Sam and I are both in the office, and and if we're not here, we've access, email and voicemail and things like that. We're here as a resource for all coaches and parents.
Well, thank you very much for that generous offer, and I definitely appreciate you guys putting this on. It's very helpful.
No, you're welcome. Good luck to you as she gets started. Okay. Well, Sam and I will stay on for another minute or two. If there are no other questions, feel free to head out of the webinar. And you know what? Actually, I do have one question just popped in, I think. Sam, I don't know if you're seeing it on your end. If your son has an interest in playing college soccer, do you think he has to get on a high level club to gain interest from colleges? I would say that depending on the college and the level, there are many different levels, even within each division. Division one, I'd say there's probably 3 or 4 tiers, but certainly playing in a high level club team increases their chances to play. The other piece of the club thing that is worth mentioning is that today, a lot of that recruitment is driven by the player. The players have to be proactive in making, in initiating conversations and initiating the process with college coaches. The college coaches are inundated with players that are looking to get into their school and play. So the kids have to be proactive in that and make videos of themselves, and get those clips put out to the coaches and reach out to them, follow up with them. Any player that is a MYSA registered player, we have a program that is free of charge called Choose It Right. It's on our website, and it's a program that helps kids through that process. The entry level to that program is absolutely free to all MYSA members. There are, of course, other levels in that program that you can upgrade to, but the beginning part of it is free, and it helps kids narrow down perhaps geographically where they would like to be. Are they looking at something that's regional and closer, or are they okay going away? And it kind of narrows the scope down a bit. So I'd encourage you to look at Choose It Right. It is on our website as a possible college resource for you. The presentation, somebody asked where it'll be saved to. If you go to our Missouri Youth Soccer Association website, it will be on there. There'll be a link to it there. Okay, with no other questions, Sam, are you seeing any other questions? No? Okay, well, everybody have a great evening. Good luck to you all as you embark down this road, and I hope that we're all back on the fields playing soccer the normal way that we're used to seeing. So thank you all for participating.